Yeah, I always say like it's like tennis balls coming at you and you're like dodging, and then it's like a bowling ball, and then it's a
Yeah,
boulder, or
yeah,
like the alarm clock and you just keep hitting snooze.
yeah, yeah,
So how many
yeah.
times are you hitting snooze? And like, physically, energetically, whatever. I know lots of times I'm like, no, stuff that down, or no, not acknowledging it, right? Like, so that's what I mean about like, you got to kind of ignore that inner intuition
Mm.
for so long. And whether it's you lose somebody or you hurt yourself or something really bad happens, right? Ultimately, the universe, God's going to get your attention if you don't want to listen.
In today's episode, we have a deeply personal and important conversation. Today's guest, Kehly MacDuff, bravely shares her challenges and adversity at a young age, including experiencing sexual assault. She also shares her courage to be able to heal, the journey that she continued to go on, developing adversity that took her all the way to being a NCAA college volleyball athlete to win a full scholarship at an American college. She shares all the learnings from the adversity she faced, from the challenges that she continued to face, and as I said, the courage that she had to find in herself to be able to still live her life to the fullest, and then also I love how she's then been able to pay that forward in how she helps other people now too. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Hi, Kehly. How you going?
Good. How are you?
Really good. Now, you played NCAA college level volleyball. For those of us in Australia, a lot of sports fans are going to know the significance, but maybe just explain the significance of playing at that level from an outside of the US perspective.
Yeah, so I'm actually from Canada. So going to play in the US is an ultimate, like the American dream, right?
Yeah.
And not that volleyball doesn't have a high level of volleyball. It's just when you get a scholarship for post-secondary school specifically, Division One, they pay for everything. So your books, your tuition, your living, you fly to
Wow.
games, you have like a practice gym, and our home stadium was 5,600 people, like, and then
This
it's
is,
just it's more of
just,
a culture and a community. And yeah,
what
they put a
age is
lot of
this?
money.
Sorry, what age is this? Sorry.
Oh, so post-secondary,
Yeah. Right.
like so college, university. So you're outside of high school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's a big deal, right? Like
big.
having all of that. Yeah, having all that paid for, and we on a scholarship.
Yeah, I had a full ride Division One scholarship.
Wow.
So that's the highest level you can play in post-secondary, like in university, and where you can get like the highest amount of scholarship dollars towards your education and your living.
So you didn't walk out with a huge college debt like most people do.
No, I didn't. No. So I played my first 2 years in Canada at a college, and typically even people in the US would go to like a college 2 years prior to going to the university. They call it a JUCO, so a junior college.
Yeah.
And then you transfer to like university. And then the difference between Canada and the US on a post-secondary level is you have 5 years eligibility in Canada. So they distribute your 4-year degree in over a 5-year period. And then in the US, it's 4 years eligibility, 4 years to your degree. So you're expected to have like, you're a full-time athlete. It's like having a full-time job. You're
Yeah.
going every weekend, you're competing every day, and you also have to keep your GPA up as well, or else you'll not be eligible to play. So there's a lot of expectation put on you physically, mentally, emotionally, academically, just giving back to the community, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And was that exacerbated at all by parents who were putting pressure on you as well in any way, or it was more just your own journey that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, no, I didn't have my parents in my life. My mom only watched one game ever in my entire life. They
Oh
both
wow.
they went down the path of addiction, started with like alcohol and cocaine to crack to heroin to my dad overdosed in 2021, but he was not in my life for majority of my life until the last few years of his life. And then my mom, I got taken away in grade 6 because she was selling cocaine and weed, and we were being left at home all by ourselves, no food, no parents, no nothing. And
Wow.
yeah, so my mom passed away when I was in grade 11. So 5 years she was using, and it went from cocaine to crack to heroin to ultimately a brain aneurysm claimed her life and she passed away. On the job, she was trying to get cleaned up, trying to get back together and get her life back on track, and just too late. Her body was. Yeah, so sports kept me on the right path and kept me driven to create a better future than what I was born into, and the lifestyle that my parents chose to live. And I realized growing up that we had a choice, and I realized it was a choice of my parents to use drugs and to try to numb their trauma and their pain. So I seen what it can do to you. So I tried to go the opposite way, and it served me really well. So it took me to the highest level that I wanted to play, and that was always a dream.
Awesome. So you made a conscious choice, which is massive at that age. But I guess when you go through experiences like that, you have to grow up really fast. So was sport, yes, it was a place to channel your energy, but was also in a way escape from what you were experiencing elsewhere?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was, like an alternate reality at home. It was like somebody's worst nightmare. And many things in my childhood was a living nightmare, but school and sports was my safe place. So, you know, um, and at that time I was so ashamed and embarrassed. I never shared any of what I was going through at school. Maybe there were some red flags along the way, but for the most part, I was able to put on a mask and be a performer, right? Because as athletes, you're kind of showing that emotions are not welcome anyway. And whether you're too excited or mad, and it's just like you got to keep it under wraps either way. So just kind of wasn't an environment that it was not welcomed, right?
Yeah, yeah. And to me, that's still true for sport. It's such a sanctuary. It's you can be fully present in the moment, away from the other things that you're doing, other things that you've got going on in your life. I've heard professional athletes talk about that, the really good ones, being able to detach themselves from the drama in their life in those moments. And I think we all have, well, I'll retract that. Maybe not all, but I feel like it's a big thing for a lot of people to be
Yeah,
able to find
it's
that.
common, right? It's
Yeah,
common.
yeah.
And I found, it's the American dream, like I said. And I actually found it to be lonelier at the top, even though I was surrounded by a lot of people.
Wow.
Um, because we're kind of taught to not talk about anything personally, not get yourself into trouble, keep everything pretty clean. You don't want anything being released or, because you're under the eye of, the National College Sports, right? It's a big
Yeah.
deal. You have a contract. You have, your part to live out to too. And their rules are you can't drink 24 hours before practice and 48 hours before a game. And there's no, drugs because there's random testing as well. So you're kind of, got your back up against the wall and you're pretty hyper vigilant on, what you're doing and hanging out with and what you're saying. Not only because you're afraid to speak about something, but maybe the repercussions of what could happen.
What did you learn about yourself having to, I guess, in a way, detach yourself from what everyone else was doing in that environment?
Around me, as the other athletes, or
Yeah.
just
So,
people around me,
yeah.
as
So
my friends and family?
if you think about you said you had to step into this space where it's quite lonely, and you're like, I'm picturing my experience at university. What we know about that age for lots of people is that when they start exploring different areas of life, and it's usually a lot of great times as well. But if you're training and you're being told what you can and can't do, I imagine you're having to be very selective about what you can get yourself involved in. which
Absolutely.
which again can be, like you described, isolating. So what did you learn through that stage that you still use today about being able to have that discipline?
Yeah, and that's exactly, you took the word right out of my mouth. I would say discipline is number one.
Yeah.
People are always like, "Oh, I'm not motivated," and honestly, like I'm rarely motivated to do anything. But it just, you know how it makes you feel, and you know that it gets you one step closer to achieving that goal. But for me, a discipline and that teamwork and that persistence and just committing to that goal and like honoring yourself, because it was myself that set that goal initially to get there, and then they're just there to hold you accountable, but at the end of the day it's really up to you to do the work, and
Yeah.
nobody can do it for you. So a lot of people could end up with a scholarship, but a lot of people actually drop out or flunk out, or their GPA is not good enough, or they start hanging out with the wrong crowd. So it's really easy to get distracted, and especially you're kind of like as an athlete, you're kind of treated like a celebrity, and especially in the States. Like athletes down there are really treated well. And like I said, it's like that culture and that community, and it feels good. But then when you leave that community and you don't have, that identity anymore, and that's where I think I really transitioned, is once I was not a post-secondary high level athlete anymore. Like, who am I? I'm not being told what to do. I'm not given a schedule. I don't have to act a certain way. I don't have to talk a certain way. You just really start to discover like who your true authentic self is. And I realized I had no idea who I was. I was literally just performing and entertaining, and not in a bad way, but as an athlete, that's what you kind of do, right?
Yeah. Oh man, I want to come back to that because that's something that people face at the absolutely at that elite level, but also just in day to day life. I see so many people just they have that taken away from them, and they're like, "Well, what am I without that?" But I want to just tap into more of that, like what you described before about the childhood choice. So did you have a dream around sport, and was it specifically volleyball, or what? And if so, what was that?
So, um, I'll start with like around grade 6. So that's when we got taken away from my mom, and we all were going to be put into foster care and social services. And I ended up going to live with my best friend, thinking that was a better choice for me. And I had set a goal to wanting to play at the next level. But I went from like one bad household to another bad household. And when I was at my childhood best friend's, her dad started raping me for a year and a half period. So I had so
What,
much
what
anger
age?
and rage, and like I was just, a shell of a human. And I took all that anger and rage to the court. So it kind of came off as maybe a chip on my shoulder, maybe aggressive, hard worker, like grit. And when I moved out of that environment finally, that's when I wrote in my journal, because I wanted to get out of this town, out of this area. I didn't have any parents. I had been orphaned, from my dad since I was 4 years old, my mom when I was 11. So I just really had no positive role models. And the only people I had positive in my life were my coaches. So in grade 9, I wrote in my journal, and I still have this journal today, that I want to play at an elite level. And I didn't put a specific sport because I played basketball and volleyball. And I just put an elite level, NCAA. And I didn't really even know what that meant at that point. I just knew that was like kind of the American dream, right? So I funneled all that anger and rage from my childhood being sexually abused for a long, long time. And it took me 20 years to even, get that secret out of me, because I didn't know how to bring it forward without crushing so many other people's worlds. It already destroyed me internally. And I held on to that like it was mine to hold, trying to protect others, and realizing, there was things that were still really affecting me, in my day-to-day life that not many people would recognize. But I was noticing in my nervous system certain situations, or I was, like I said, I was that hypervigilant kind of wall against the back, like not really trustworthy, and like trusting of other people. And then what really sparked it is I decided I wanted to have children with my partner, and I ended up miscarrying. So this brought up all this sexual trauma. And then it was like, time to be healed, obviously, because I feel like when it's meant to be healed, it will reveal itself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
20 years it was inside of me, and I didn't tell a single person. I didn't even put words to it. I didn't write it down in case someone were to find it. And yeah, it served me well and it got me to the highest level. But, I definitely put my body and my mind and my soul through a living hell to get there, even though externally, people would have thought that I had the best life and the best dream. And I must have like the most supportive parent. And, I had none of that.
Wow. What age were you when you went to live with your
I
best friend?
was 12 years old. So 12 to 14 years old. He groomed me for like the first 6 months and love bombed me and did all the things to build that trust and that connection. And he would do it when they were home, coming into my bedroom, and when they were sleeping, and I didn't know how to like react, and I was so afraid of him too, right? So yeah, I took a lot of that rage outside of the home and definitely wasn't processing it in the right way. But
Hmm.
um yeah, just sports, I would say, saved my life in many, many ways.
Yeah, wow. See, 20 years where you kept that to yourself. What, you don't necessarily know it when you're in it, but it must have been tearing you apart. Like, what do you know? Like, do you look back now and look at the impacts it was having? I know you just talked about how you would channel that anger, but what else must have been affecting you at so many levels?
Not committing to, a significant partner, a romantic relationship. I was in long-term relationships, but I would never um, talk about the future or being married or having children, because ultimately I didn't trust anybody and I didn't even know what love was, because anybody who said they loved me were hurting me, whether it was my mom or my dad or, people who were supposed to take care of me, and they said they loved me. So I think ultimately anybody who maybe said they loved me, but their actions didn't align, I never really trusted that, right? I
Mm,
really, and mine's love language, acts of service and quality time. So if you're just giving me lip service, I'm not listening. Like, I see through it, right? So um definitely I would say trust issues. And like if anybody was yelling and screaming or really like aggressive, I would like shut down and like, freeze. Later on, like little things like my partner would go grab my inner thigh, and then I would, jolt and freeze, and I wouldn't really know why, because they were doing out of love, out of genuine care.
mm,
And that's just how I was being abused. Like, I'd be woken up by like him coming at my like inner thigh,
mm,
and like I was in a dead asleep. So for me, it was just like noticing those little things that I kind of get that nervous system charge, or my heart rate's beating out of my chest, or, I'm sweating in certain situations that aren't even relevant to the present moment. So just
mm.
becoming so aware of that and wanting to heal that for myself, and then figuring out, that root cause.
Awful. Um, do you? I want to come back to that. What you talked about, the moments that are completely unrelated, because it's a really powerful thing. But do you find that now, because you coach people in sport, but you're also mentoring and guiding people in other ways as well? Do you find you attract people who have walked a similar path, and you can actually help them through those challenges because you've been on this journey?
Yeah, I tend to attract like every walk of life, but the people who want to do the inner work and the trauma healing, and, the regulation of the nervous system and that kind of stuff, and just learning daily tools and practices, they have to hit rock bottom about 6 to 7 times, whether that's a near death experience or trialing and erroring every diet and every supplement and fad and wrap, every kind of shortcut. And
Yep.
then they're finally like, okay, Kelly, okay, I'm ready to do the work. Because most of the time they'd come to me for training first. And of
Yeah.
course, they get fit and break their PRs and they're feeling better in their clothes, but they're still not like whole on the inside, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Okay, I'm gonna get this nutrition, so I can fuel my body for my day and my activity level and what my goals are." And then they still have that, natter in their brain, or that frog in their throat, or that ache in their back, or, continuing to like, hurt themselves, or, maybe attract toxic relationships, or certain endings that keep happening. And so, yeah, they kind of have to go down their own journey.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, hi, like it's not an easy path, but it's worth it. And the only way out is through. So when you're ready, and I only help people who want to help themselves first, and they take radical responsibility and they take ownership of what their part is. And I would say in the past, I helped people, work from the outside in, and now I'm working from the inside out. I have had the body, I've had the success, all the things, and that didn't make me any happier. So I had to literally collapse my whole life and like clear out everything and really build from the foundation up in a solid way, and one that I can sustain and obtain and like find peace and joy along the way, and not feel like it needs to be like hustle and grind and do because I was an overachiever too, right?
Yeah. Well, I really honor you, Kelly, that you're able to come on and talk so openly about this. And yeah, for anyone that's been through that, they will definitely relate to the impact that's had. And I want to touch on one of those impacts, whether no matter what experience you've had in the past, we have these moments where our body reacts in a certain way and there's no logical reason for it. We can't explain it, and we react and we're like, well, there must be something wrong with me, right? Could be something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. So can you talk to a little bit about that and explain to the listeners and the viewers like how that works from a nervous system perspective, how these things then impact us in unrelated moments, like you said, when you get kind of like, would you say cold sweats or whatever like from nowhere, and how important it is to be able to process that so that you can free your body up.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had to give my power away a few times before I learned my lesson, and creating boundaries with myself and other people was the first step. And I had given my power away a few times, whether that's through my physical response or verbal response or emotional response. And I realized it's not really necessarily, like I said, that situation or the person. So I started with like Reiki, so energy healing, balancing your chakras. So just doing kind of the inner work on myself to try to figure out what that was, because I didn't really know what it was. So I just became curious of like, how can I heal myself, or how can I better myself for myself and for other people? So just went from Reiki to psychic mediumship to Akashic record readings to angel card readings. So just trying to find that clarity again outside of myself. And then now, I'm to a point where I just tune in internally and ask my body what I need that day. And it might be just having a bath, or it might be like, I need a 5-minute bathroom break. And you're just going to do like deep breathing in the bathroom. Going for a walk in nature, exercising and moving your body. So just doing those daily things that bring up that frequency and building that strong aura. So, the negativity can bounce off of you and you don't absorb it. Because a lot of the stuff that I had wasn't even mine to carry. So that was the biggest chore, is clearing what bullshit wasn't mine to begin with. And then figuring out, okay, what is mine? And then how do I approach that in like a mini, like a micro, steps, because it's not going to be an overnight process. I mean, I've been on my healing journey now for like 16 years. And I literally just 3 years ago was able to look at the deepest, darkest parts of myself that I never wanted to look at. I never wanted to admit. I never wanted to put energy to, right?
Yeah.
So it is a long road, and it's okay. And every day is a new day.
Yeah. And it's ongoing. It's not like we cure ourselves of everything. It's then continuing to find the next thing. We just get much better at dealing with it. And I think that's one of the really important lessons I learned was, you think you just got to get to this place when I'll be happy when all this happens. And it's like, well, life brings ups and downs. That's just a given. Like it's energy of seasons. So just being able to get better at, it's like holding your nerve through the challenges, and the quicker you can, like you described, learn the lesson or reach acceptance, then the faster you're able to move back to something more positive. You mentioned two words there that I think are really important for people to really take on board when they're ready, and that's being curious So starting to ask better questions when you've been through and you've hit your 6 or 7 rock bottoms. I'm fascinated that you've got to hit that many,
Oh,
because it's
that's so
like I'm
true.
thinking back going, well, yeah, but then okay, I think 6 or 7 until maybe some big event rocks you, which is like worth about 4 or 5, perhaps.
Yeah, I
Um,
always say like it's like tennis balls coming at you and you're like dodging, and then it's like a bowling ball, and then it's a
yeah,
boulder, or
yeah,
like the alarm clock and you just keep hitting snooze.
yeah, yeah,
So how many
yeah.
times are you hitting snooze? And like, physically, energetically, whatever. I know lots of times I'm like, no, stuff that down, or no, not acknowledging it, right? Like, so that's what I mean about like, you got to kind of ignore that inner intuition
Mm.
for so long. And whether it's you lose somebody or you hurt yourself or something really bad happens, right? Ultimately, the universe, God's going to get your attention if you don't want to listen.
Yeah, I learnt the same concept through feather, brick, truck, and if you don't listen to the feather, you're going to get the brick, which is just a bit more brutal, and then if you don't, then the truck comes, right? Um, I think it's what you said there. It's like we don't have to have these major things from our childhood for us to have these patterns that run out, but it is important that at some point we stop and actually address what it is, or the lesson will keep playing out. And you just come back to those words, curious and responsible. Curious because then you need to start asking better questions. And I think, as you would know, you said you've been on this journey for 16 years, being open to doing something differently that every part of your programming has told you. So like the stuffing down emotions, we stuff down emotions. I imagine for your scenario, there was an element of stuffing it down to keep yourself safe. And I think that's what people do in general, whatever safe means for them, emotionally safe, mentally safe, physically safe, keep stuffing it down. And then it becomes such a hardwired pattern that it then repeats. And
Mhm.
then being curious and being open to a new way and taking responsibility, which to me is one of the most, if not most challenging levels of acceptance, but also the absolute most freeing. So what tips would you have for people who are like me when I first learned that, going, I take responsibility for everything in my life. There's no fucking way that I'm being responsible for all these really poor things that happen to me. But ultimately you learn that, well, that's the only way to take back control. So what are some tips you would give people to be able to step into that place of responsibility who perhaps aren't quite there yet?
Yeah, I would say, of course, it's not maybe necessarily your fault of what happened to you, but it is your responsibility to heal it and do something about you. So you're not, oozing onto your loved ones as well, and kind of, an eye for an eye mentality and that chip on your shoulder, like, somebody owes you something. And then secondly, I would say don't take it so personally. Like, usually it's not about us. Something that happens to us, or somebody says something or does something, it's usually a reflection of them. So I would say, whatever you're being triggered, look at it like, okay, if I'm being triggered, what is it in me that needs a part of healing, or a little visit with, right? So let's say you're feeling jealous, and maybe there's situations in your life that you've made other people feel jealous, and now you're getting a little piece of that. Or maybe you're feeling insecure. um the same thing, just kind of look outside of you, and then look it back like a mirror. It's like, what is this about, saying about me that I need to heal? And that, what's that projection, right? So I think, yeah, like that self-reflection, and then that accountability, not taking it personally. um and then just finding somebody who's maybe experienced it or went through it, or maybe has felt that same emotion, and ask them how they have done it as well. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help and ask for support, because I did that for many years. I just thought I should lone wolf it and figure it
Mm.
out on my own. But ultimately, we're pretty good at putting, a performance on, and putting our mask on and our smile on. And a good friend is going to see the tears behind that smile, or behind the funny guy or the jokester. Like, we're going to see your pain. So surround yourself with people who see you even behind, that big smile or big facade. And then last, I would say have like self-love and self-compassion, because ultimately we can have a lot of self-care, but if you don't have any self-love, then, you're missing a big part of, the puzzle, I would say.
Yeah, well said. When you were talking there about getting someone to help, I was drawn to what you described before as saying that your role models were your coaches. And I think back to my childhood, how for them, for the longest time, I didn't fully appreciate just how impactful and positive some of the coaches I had growing up really were on my life. So could you share a story maybe about one of those coaches that actually touched you in a very positive way and perhaps kept you going? Like you said, sport saved your life, that actually was so impactful that they helped you to get through those times?
Yeah, actually, the coach I had in grade 7, when I was living at my best friend's house, she didn't know this at the time, but she does know now. And during that time, she was my basketball coach, and she just believed in me. She kind of knew a little bit what was going on at home, but not a lot. And she always just encouraged me to work hard and play hard and be fair and be respectful and be kind. And she really expected a lot of me, but I really thrived in that environment in structure and discipline. And she knew how to encourage me to be better and not to shut down. So I would say just having, a coach believe in you and encourage you to be better, and also, be hard on you when you needed to be. And she ended up being my coach in high school. So she was the coach when I broke my back. She was there. I broke my back playing basketball. So she was there. When my mom passed away in grade 11, she was there. She gave me opportunities and got me in front of coaches and ID camps and scouts. She would drive me to these places to get me there, or fly me, um, use like fundraised money or personal money. And she would just make sure I had enough, money for food when I got there, or a good pair of shoes. So she really just put me in the right places with the right people to expose me to the right environments. And she went above and beyond for me, I will say. Like, she didn't do that for everybody. In grade 11, I got to go to Hawaii with her. So I think we just had like a relationship that was built over, over a decade. And she supported me through the worst times of my life and the best times of my life. And she never judged me for, maybe the wrong decisions I made in my life, and the better decisions. And she's one of my most valued, treasured, mentors in my life, and still is. And
Oh,
I'm forever
tingles.
grateful for her.
Yeah. She sounds like the mum that you never had.
Yeah, and she was just a badass, like
Yeah.
strong and athletic and caring and just a powerhouse. Yeah.
I love that even through our difficult times, we have these guides that come into our life at different times and provide us what we needed that we weren't getting elsewhere, and just how impactful that is on our life. Yeah, and I don't understand the how all that works from a spiritual perspective, but I just know that there's always guides there for us, and they've been there our whole life, and we recognise them. For me, it was realising just how impactful my older brother had been, and what you described there. He was the same. He believed in me when I needed someone to believe in me. Not that other people weren't necessarily believing in me, but he knew how to deliver it in a way that I understood. And I think that's been a key part for me going forward, of like, he gave me that belief, and the steps that he took and the things that he said, I didn't realize this until recently, how I'd carry that forth and how I help people now is that, and I say that to them, I'll believe in you until you do. Is that what you found as well? Like wanting to pay that forward, whether consciously or having just done that naturally over the course of your life since you met her?
Yeah, I would say I really took a lot of the traits and qualities that I admired about her, and I tried to also, learn them and then integrate them into my life and embody it ultimately. And I would say I definitely got the best parts of her, and as well as the learning to stick up for myself, learning to be a leader, learning to take, the road less traveled, And she always encouraged me, if the crowd's going that way, it's okay to go the other way, or, to take a pause and, look back and check out your surroundings. Like, just make sure, you're following your true north and not just going with the crowd. So she really taught me how to follow my, North Star and my moral compass, and really follow my heart before I even knew what that was.
Yeah, wow. Awesome. Love it. You mentioned before you got to the end of that college journey, and then so I imagine that's where there was no road then for you after that. Yeah, so if you not got that next step of beyond that, like there's no going pro or anything like that, and then you end up getting to that place of, well, who am I without my sport? What did you learn there? Because I see that all the time, definitely with elite athletes. They talk about it consistently about, well, I didn't really know what I was doing then. And you described it, the bubble, right? You always got a schedule. I've got to be a certain way, I've got to act a certain way. And now all that structure's taken away. So what did you learn from that? And have you been able to apply in the rest of your life?
Yeah. So, just that, losing my identity within that, being a student athlete, I had to hit that deep, dark depression first, before I could really build myself back up. And then I went on a 2-year travel journey. So I went out, to try to find what that was and
Yeah.
what I wanted, what Kehly wanted. And I created my own timeline. I stayed in places if I wanted to, and, flew to other places if I wanted to. So over a 2-year period, I went to, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Nepal, India, and Australia. So I went on an amazing, amazing adventure, met, some extraordinary people, got to see different parts of the world. And what I recognized is, like in Canada, I was, like on welfare and Canadian poverty, and, just kind of like like the ghetto of Canada at that time for me. Like, that just felt like the lowest of the low. But when I went to, these developing countries, these kids don't know anything outside their community or their little lean-to, as a home, and they're sleeping on the ground. And, you know, yeah, so the kids, are staying at home taking care of each other, the siblings, and, the cousins and the parents and the grandparents are out working to try to bring enough money home, for food for the day or some more shelter and clothing. So I had really seen a lot of, pain and suffering, and I looked at my life like I had an education. I had people who believed in me. I knew different than, just outside my little region. So I really started realizing my problems were, terrible, but still very first world problems. So at least I knew the difference. I chose differently. These kids don't have another option. That's all they know. And, at least I had a choice to heal my generational trauma and, what I was born into, right? Because these children, I really think that it's just unfortunate and a lack of knowing. And it's not a lack of wanting to know or wanting to discover. It's everything around them. They don't have access to computers or magazines, or, they just think that's a fantasy, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a world they can't even imagine. And like you said, they're happier than we are
There.
with all these so-called luxuries. It's fascinating. I'm curious, Kelly, you grew up in a house of addiction. Did you, or maybe you haven't even been conscious of this, do you think there were times where you've taken on that sort of addictive way of living in other areas of your life, whether it be your sport or otherwise?
Yeah, I was a overachiever and a workaholic and a people pleaser and a peacekeeper. I Yeah, that was my form of avoidance. I could mental my way through it, physical my way through it, work through anything. I achieved every goal, every big dream of mine that I ever wanted to do, that I could imagine. I've done all of that, and I realized nothing outside of me was going to make me feel whole. And once I realized, like, coming back into our heart and realizing we have been whole all along, but just that remembrance of who we were before we were traumatized, or before we took on conditioning of the environment we grew up in, the environment we maybe through religion or culture, or, just different dynamics people surround themselves with. And they say we're a reflection of the top 5 people you hang out with. And, they say that they can tell who you are by who you surround yourself with. So I would say just realizing you're the common denominator in it all. So figuring out, just try to get quieter, stiller, um, just go internal. The answers are inside of you. The power is inside of you, and you can't go wrong when you go from your heart centered.
Yeah, and bringing that back to a sport connection, it's that power of visualization that if anyone's done any sport, they talk about it in all different areas, is the importance of visualizing. On Jack Nicklaus talked about it. I don't. Every single shot I played in my head first. It was something I learned in. I wish I'd learned much earlier, but I love being able to teach the young athletes that I coach about visualization. But it's that same place, right? It's stillness. It's giving your mind a rest to be able to, and then feed it with some positive information. So, could you talk to us a bit about how you marry up what you do, helping people as their mentor, and also from that sport perspective, where you inevitably have to use different language, how you help people to find that visual process, that mindfulness, to be able to take them to a better level of self-belief and performance?
Yeah, I approach every person uniquely, because each person, has their strengths and weaknesses, but we kind of break it down on a holistic level. So as a whole body, so your emotional body, your mental body, physical body, spiritual, and soul. And a lot of the times we'll start with that inner child, the people who are ready to do the work.
So this is
And
even for young athletes that you're coaching, you go straight there?
yeah, well,
Yeah,
like,
cool.
in their language, of
Yes,
course,
right.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
when they, like, react a certain way or say a certain thing, I will ask a certain question and ask them to reflect on that. And I challenge them to see if that's their belief or maybe what they heard. So
Yep.
just, teaching them awareness, I think, is the biggest thing. And, the power of the spoken word, or even if it's just internal, negative talk.
Yep.
And also learning how to process it, asking them, like, showing them, the wheel of emotions. Out of these 60 emotions, what's coming up? So yes, it might be anger, but is it sadness under that? Like, what is it that makes you feel sad? Um, and then how can I support you? So just asking them the questions that they need to be asking themselves, but not telling them the way they should be thinking, not telling them the way they should be acting, and just creating that safe space for them to be vulnerable and open up. And then we can kind of reprogram that conditioning, and, that inner confidence and that belief and that self-worth. And I think just building it up from, emotional connection, as well as, like, through the physical kind of somatic part of it as well.
Hmm. It sounds like that they would have been all the things you had to learn going through your journey of all of that trauma, to be able to break free from all of those things that you got told and that you experienced and you heard. Like, I'm actually curious. Like you said, that happened for a year and a half. How did you remove yourself from that situation? Did you have to move out? Did something happen that allowed that to unfold for you?
Yeah, so I ended up moving to my grandma's. My 2 sisters initially went to my grandma's, and then my brother was sent up to my dad's, and then I moved in with my best friend at the time. And, then when my oldest sister graduated and my other sister moved out, there was enough room at my grandma's, so I went there. So pretty much my choice was live on the streets, go to foster care, um, or go to my grandma's. And, my uncle had sexually molested me as a young child. So I didn't want to go there when he was there. So at that point, he also was graduated and out of the home. But again, nobody knew about that. I just, again, didn't tell anyone because I didn't want people to hurt him, harm him, shun him. So I just thought this was again mine to hold, and it was never mine. These men were not kind humans, and I shouldn't have worried about them, right?
Yeah, and actually that really struck me when you talked about
Ian, I
that.
just have to plug in my computer. I thought it was plugged in. 1 sec.
Yeah, I'll keep talking while you do that. That's one of my favorite tricks is forgetting to have it plugged in. When
Well,
you're
I
moving,
had
you
it down
hop
there. I was
around a lot.
like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you talked about that earlier about not wanting to speak up because you didn't want it to impact others, and being a recover. Well, I was going to say recovered, but it's recovering because it's an ongoing journey. People pleaser is that we make these decisions because we're worried about the impact for us, and we put everyone else first. And I imagine for that thing, you're thinking about your best friend, you're thinking about like lots of different areas, you're thinking about the greater family, all these different things. And while that logically might make sense, it's the opposite that's true. Is the moment that you actually stand up for what's right, then it actually frees up everyone in that situation. So how did you find the courage to do that? I know you said that came later, but I imagine being able to start taking that journey of standing up for yourself and pushing back and creating boundaries would have come earlier than what you described 16 years ago.
Well, I think my biggest thing personally was I was afraid of what my parents would do because they were selling drugs for like the Hells Angels, which is like gangs, and they could have had anybody literally get rid of, these people, including, my family member. So for me, I think I was more afraid of what my parents would do and who they would
Whoa.
get to take care of these people. Because I know my parents felt guilty enough for the choices they were making. But knowing that they put me in these environments and because of their actions, I know from knowing my parents, they would have done something, that they would have never been able to take back again. So I think it's kind of that eye for an eye. Like I was afraid of what my parents would do. So it wasn't so much even how other people would react or respond when I come forward, but how would my parents not be able to, react in that situation. So I waited till both my parents passed away. So I didn't have to worry about what they could potentially do. Um, so I think I was more afraid of kind of the consequence of other people's actions. So that would be number one. Number two, knowing I was hurting so much and how that would hurt my best friend and her mom. Even though like her mom and her dad are not together for many, many years, he was not a good person to anybody. And but still nobody wants to know that their dad's a rapist and a serial rapist. And like he stole my virginity, he took my innocence, and he just got away with it for 20 years. I'm sure he's done this to multiple other victims. And um I hope one day, people can listen to my story and find the courage to say something sooner, regardless of the actions of others, regardless of how people may react and respond. And I will say it was my worst nightmare. How these people reacted was they only thought about themselves. And I was pretty much made to believe that why didn't I go to the cops if this didn't happen? And if this really happened, why'd you wait so long? What about my family and what this is going to do to my family? So when I came forward to my best friend and her mom, who I loved dearly and I still do, and I understand we all have our journey, they just totally rejected me and abandoned me and neglected me. And those were, my three biggest wounds of my lifetime is neglect and abandonment. And especially when I'm telling the truth and it took me that long to come forward. And then it was just pretty much, you know, excused and just never talked about again. And yeah, it's been 3 years and I haven't had a conversation. You know, when I went to the police, I told them I was going to the police and they just didn't want to hear it. And they haven't reached out once, they haven't apologized. And I I don't owe them anything. I love them and I send them love, but when I needed them the most, they walked out on me. So,
Hmm.
when I was at my lowest and darkest, I realized who my people were, and the people who were with me when my nervous system was racked, when I was going back to that 12-year-old self that couldn't fight for herself or didn't have a voice.
Mm.
So my body went back to that trauma, because they say your trauma is literally like an iceberg. You're frozen in time. So when I had to go to the cops and, repeat this story multiple times, and then I was being like abused by, like re-traumatized by our systems. Like I went to the like a nonprofit rape, like sexual trauma and abuse place. And the lady who was taking my intake form, I'm literally sharing the hardest things of my life. And as she's filling it out, she's like, cool, cool. And then writing some more. And then I would tell her some more. And she's like, cool, cool. And I'm like,
You're
I just
kidding me?
wanted, and I was just like, what do you mean? Like, I think she was nervous or uncomfortable. And I don't know,
Mm.
like, she didn't even realize what she was saying, but she was like, I was like blacking out and seeing red as she's saying, cool, cool. So I left there and I never went back. And then I went to the cops the first time, and I live in a different province than where it happened. And I asked the initial cop who was going to take my statement, like, do I need to just go to this, like British Columbia, where the province is where this happened? Because I don't want to have to tell you and then go there and do the same thing. Like, I may as well just drive the 2 hours and go there. They're like, no, no, like you can do it and we'll get it transferred over. No big deal. Well, I did it. And then they called me back a week later. They're like, no, sorry, you're going to have to go in. So I had to go in, and
Do
they
it again.
ask you really, really brutal, detailed questions, as that's our job.
Mm.
But re-traumatizing me after it took me that long, and then to reopening up and then just send you on your way. And it's like, oh, are you suicidal? Like, are you okay? Like, here's your emergency plan. Like, if this guy comes after you, you need to have an exit strategy. And then I tried to get like a restraining order, and like where he, like if he wanted to come after me once he found out that I went to the police. They were like, oh, sorry, because it's such a historic event, we have no proof that he would physically harm you. And I'm like, okay, so raping someone for a year and a half is not enough fucking evidence? Like,
Yeah.
it is disgusting, our system. And there's zero legal system in our justice system, and in the criminal system in Canada specifically. For charges to be approved, they have to be 85 to 100% sure he's going to be convicted in the end of it. So a historic case like mine, 20 plus years ago, of course I didn't have any evidence. I didn't go to the cops or tell anyone or take pictures or, go get a rape kit done. But like, that was the time when we had phones that were plugged into the wall. Like, what was I supposed to make a 911 phone call when they were right there,
Mm.
at home? Like, okay, take me to the hospital. Like, who at that age would be like, yeah, I need to go report this? Like, I was
Yeah. Yeah.
afraid for my life.
Wow. And I don't know what the answer is, but I have had these conversations with women, like whether it's domestic violence or what you've experienced, sexual assault, and the system doesn't make it easy. And I mean, I guess there's has to be things in place to cover off everything, but surely after you open up and tell this story that you'd be provided with at least a free counselor or something to be able to then help you through that, because that's unfortunately you see it in lots of different areas, like in lots of service industries where that's just not, it should be just a given, but it's just not.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I did have that provided to me, the nonprofit. But they were, again, cool, cool. Wasn't gonna
Unhelpful.
make me
Yeah.
feel safe and de-armor myself when I had been armored up for many, many years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Again, I appreciate you sharing so openly, Kelly. It's well, I know it's going to be helpful to you to be able to tell your story, because it always is. But I'm sure there's other people who are listening that are going to be taking so much out of this. I'm curious for you around that people pleasing side, how that transferred into sport. And I think of it like this. I remember in seniors when a coach called us in, we're going through a bit of a hole, and just asked us what motivated us. And I remember, a lot of people talking about, oh, I want to win and all these different things. And for me, it was like, I just don't want to let anyone down. Like my people pleasing was still playing out in sport, and in other areas of life, don't want to let anyone down. It was all about worrying about what everyone else is experiencing. Is that something that you've found as well, that it showed up in sport and showed up in repeated areas?
Yeah, I think for me, the people pleasing, it was, wanting to be accepted for me. I
Mm,
wanted to be part of that community, a part of that tribe, a part of that team. So mine was more connection and kind of that soul family. So for me,
mm,
community and connection, that's why I was the peacekeeper and the people pleaser. I mean, it still was strong in some of my beliefs, but in a lot of ways, I molded myself or dimmed my light or withheld certain parts of myself because I was afraid to be shunned or shamed or kicked out of that community, right? Not accepted. So I think, that acceptance and the big part of that team aspect, that's what I loved and craved, I guess.
mm. I don't know about you, but I still love that now. Like, because that was my
Hmm.
experience too. It's a place that you feel like you belong when the rest of your world perhaps don't. And finding places that have that similar vibe of a sporting team where we're lifting each other up. And sure, we're holding each other to account when difficult conversations need to be had, but it's very much through a positive lens and working towards a common goal. So powerful, right?
Hmm.
You mentioned finding your voice. That was one of the biggest lessons looking back over my sporting journey. Is like that's the one place that I actually found my voice. I had an international football, former international football player as a coach when I was 13 and 14. And he said, in soccer, football, you have to be talking. You should come off with a sore throat from talking the whole time. And he would make me talk. And I played as a forward. So I spent a lot of time the plays elsewhere and I'm standing and he would just be like, I can't hear you. Like, and oh man, for a shy kid, that was so hard. But I just realized how hugely beneficial that was for me to be able to do that, yelling out in front of all these people that I wouldn't have done it any other way. Did you have an experience like that, finding your voice through sport, being the encourager, and how's that positively impacted you as well?
Yeah, I think initially, I was always the captain or co-captain, and I was point guard. So a lot of times leading my team and leading the plays. So I had to naturally, be vocal, but I was also very shy. Like naturally, I was very shy. So it was a challenge for me as well. But I think it's like a muscle. You want to get a stronger bicep, you use it. And, I've been working really hard on sharing my own personal story because it's one thing to public speak, but to be vulnerable and share your story and your whole truth and nothing but your truth and not edit and censor yourself. That's a whole different task. And I would say through practice, in safe places and safe communities is important. And also healing your stuff so you're not oozing and wounding onto other people just because a lot of times we're shitty listeners and we're not really hearing what people are saying and we're just so quick to respond or react or have an answer and sometimes I think it's finding like it's the opposite end of the spectrum, knowing when to use your voice or maybe in this point of your life, maybe it's through action, because then that's a powerful way to lead. Or maybe it's just creating that safe space. So I think for me, I had the best of all worlds. Growing up, I had that leadership, that vocal, but also the quiet and like really hard worker. So people seen through my actions that I meant what I said when I did say it. And then later on in life, because I didn't share any of my personal stories until about, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, just little tidbits. And then the last 3 years, just being fully transparent and, my fullest expression of myself and my truth again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a particular transferable skill that you learned through sport that still serves you today?
Um, I think the Maybe the most important one is self-care. And I have had seasons of, really good self-care and seasons of really good self-love. And now integrating the both of them is very important because I used to bypass everything through self-care, right? And I had no self-love. So then I
Mm.
really had to like put the self-care on the back burner and like really learn what self-love was. So I wasn't bypassing through physical and kind of mental workaholic, those kind of things.
Yeah,
Because I was
yeah,
really good at that. So integrating that self-love and self-care and knowing that you're going to have seasons like we talked about and but just staying true to those daily rituals and those practices that continue to fill your cup up and build your frequency up and make that aura a lot stronger, right? Because then you're going to naturally attract the like-minded friends or soul family.
yeah. And that's such a powerful point, is to be able to, yeah, that distinction between self-care and self-love, because I see that so often with people when they're not going well. The solution, their default solution is physical, and that the physical is important, but I love how you've drawn that distinction, because it's only a small part of it, and we need to make sure we're looking after ourselves mentally, and we're looking after ourselves emotionally, and we're looking after ourselves spiritually, and whatever that means to you, whether it's just in terms of your people connections and your community connections, rather than it being anything deeper than that. It's really important that we're managing that. So yeah, I love how you've drawn that distinction. I've been guilty of going too far the other way, of getting too lost in that self love part, and then neglecting the physical, which I think you were referring to then. So the last couple of years has been really back on that physical journey, and it's amazing the strength when you marry all of it together, isn't it?
Absolutely. And just knowing that there's a difference. Cause I was like, self-love? What the fuck's that? Like
Yeah,
what? You have
yeah,
time for
yeah, yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. 100%. Hey, one of the things that I love about sport is how it takes us to this place of being in the zone, of being in flow. And I can remember the handful of times that it's happened in sport. Thankfully, I've been able to find a way to make it part of my life away from sport. But did you have an experience when you were in the zone where particular sporting memory where everything just unfolded, and yeah, could you tell us a bit about that and what you got out of that experience?
Well, the day my mom passed away, we had a championship game that day, and it was like a local championship game. And of course, my coaches didn't expect me to show up. And I showed up halfway through the game. We were down by points. I didn't realize the game was at the time it was. I thought it was a bit later, and so I went on the court, and they just said like, if you want to come off, let us know. If you want to play the whole game, let us know. So I went on the court and and it was basketball, and every shot I took went in. Every pass I made was like perfect pass, and nobody could stop me. I think I had like a 30 plus point game, which is
Wow, in a half.
extraordinary. And on average, I typically got anywhere from 20 to 28 points a game, which is amazing. And I had just as many assists, if not more. So as a point guard, that's pretty great. And so I would say that was probably my biggest highlight. And then in university, we were talking about visualization. I visualized before every game. I'd listen to my music and I would shut my eyes and just lay on the floor and visualize the game like ahead of me. And I would visualize certain plays in my head. And there was a specific one play that, so at this time I was playing volleyball, so it was for volleyball. And I visualized this we got blocked. Like we had our right side or an outside hitter's hitting outside. I'm covering the block, and it went off the blocker's hands. And in the visualization, it went behind my head. So I had to like turn around and then dig the ball. And it was like a super hard dig, and it's really fast because it's very fast paced. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I pictured this play, like, step by step by step, exactly how I needed to move, respond, where I needed to be, And like that, I realized the power of visualization and how we could manifest things into our life, whether it's through activities or sports or relationships or, certain people in different environments. So I realized the power of visualization and, also how to not like control it, but also surrender to the parts of the game or parts of the visualization that you'll never know. You just have to be present in that moment. So just
Yeah, yeah.
not getting too stuck on like trying to control the outcome of everything, and then just truly like, tapping into that like inner knowing at that point.
Yeah, and I love that you included that, because when you were telling your story, it reminded me of one of my stories of the times I was in the zone, and it was in cricket. We have, it's not like the professional level where they play consecutive days. It's like you play consecutive Saturdays. So I was batting at the end of the day, and I was sick at the back end of the week. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was in the middle of an innings, I wouldn't have gone. But I went, zero expectations, just I'll go out there and scratched around for a while, sort of hitting a few. And then at some point, everything just started to, it didn't matter where the ball was bowled to me, I was just hitting it clean, flush. And I think what you described there is your mum's just died. Like, I imagine you wouldn't have had a great deal of focus on outcome. You're just going out there completely detached and playing. And I wonder how often in life we all get caught in the outcome, and that's to the detriment of our performance. And the best performances, from my experience, are when you just do, which is why when we're children, we're so much better at it. When we're adults, we get too much in our head. When we just do and we go out there and the outcome will take care of itself, we get so much better results. Is that something that you've been able to apply to other areas as well?
Yeah, I think, now realizing that in life there's birth and there's death, and that's part of life. And navigating grief, it's not linear. There's not one path, there's not a blueprint. So I think, again, staying present in your body and not getting too stuck in that trauma of like what happened and that story, just knowing and accepting that that was part of your journey. And I'm a firm believer that, I picked my blueprint. I chose this path. I chose this karmic debt. I'm not saying I deserve it, but I'm here to heal it and alchemize it so I can, hopefully, transmute myself to the next energetic or angelic level. I'm like, I'm not coming back to this 3D plane. That's for sure. It's like duality and pain and suffering. And, I learned a lot through Tibetan Buddhism is we create our own pain and suffering, and, fear's an illusion, time's an illusion. And again, just like kind of that wheel of life. Like if we are causing harm to others in this lifetime, well, in the next lifetime, we're going to be the ones being punished. So just, leaving this world a better place than what we found it, being kind along the way. And yeah, just again, the coming back to that, don't take things personally, and, figure out your bullshit and sit in it for a little while, but then move on, because
It's
nobody wants to hear the story over and over again unless you're taking action.
That's good. The bit that really stood out there for me is something that I know the best teams talk about this in terms of leadership and culture, is leaving a better place than where you left it. Like the All Blacks, which is world famous team, where that's one of their big things, is like you're a custodian of the jersey, but you want to make sure you leave it in a better place, to the point where they clean the change room. And I know the Japanese football teams are the same. Like they Korean football teams, it's like a cultural thing, right? Leave everything in a better place than what you found it. And I think, if for me personally, that's the thing that I'll really take from what you just said then, is regardless of what your spiritual beliefs and how you look at what the journey is, if you live
Yeah,
from that perspective, then you can't go wrong.
exactly. Yeah. Whether you believe in God or the universe or reincarnation, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, our goal is, I would hope, love, unconditional love and peace and happiness and joy, leaving, like I said, ultimately leaving this place better than when we found it.
Yeah, love it. Now, there's going to be sports fans, of course, listening to this podcast. What legacy do you see sport leaving, whether that's something that you'll be included in or just in general for a more positive future for us?
I think the legacy that I would like to see is, much, much sooner being introduced into the mental health aspect of things and talking more about people's home life and how that can affect your playing time in the court or in the classroom, and knowing that it's not separate. You can't turn a part of you off or deny a part of you. So I would say the legacy I would like to leave is um, empowering the younger generations coming up to find their voice, whether it's through writing or having somebody listening to you in a safe place or upon reflection. And then, I invite the coaches and the leaders in these communities to also ask these kids how they're doing, and have they ate 3 meals that day, and did they sleep in their own bed, and did anybody come into their room that night, and to realize when children and athletes are acting out, it's usually something's going on internally and they don't know how to express it or process it. So I challenge and invite every person who's in leadership of this next generations to come. The people, I always say they're either going to be leaders of gangs or they're going to be the CEOs and the bosses and the coaches. So you choose. And what you say and how you act towards these younger kids is going to leave a massive impact on them. So, I want to again leave these athletes, more aware and kind of tapping into all bodies and realizing that there's not only, one way to skin a cat, they say. So there's lots of routes, but just finding that really, I would say communication is very key within that community, and welcome it all. Don't
Mm-hmm.
disregard anger or resentment or bitterness or challenge, because I feel like that's a big part of it.
Yeah. And if you don't know, you don't have the skills, then go find them. Because to me, what you described there is like having the courage to address the issues that aren't sport related, and not just the most powerful for the children, but in terms of what it's going to do for the impact that's going to have on the rest of their lives. Because it's
Mhm.
like we both described our journey. It's a sanctuary. It's a safe place. It's a place to detach from other areas. So you get an opportunity to be that same person that we've both experienced, that mentor that just had such a profound impact on our life by going beyond just surface level. And
Yeah. Yeah, I find too, you'll have a lot more respect from your athletes if you really get to know them. And I'm not saying you need to interrogate them and question them, but if there's things that come up, red flags, we all know them when we see them. But then we, just avoid it, or, oh, it'll get better, or, oh, it's their parents' job. It's like, no, it's not. If you're witnessing it, you have a responsibility to take action. And if you don't know how to support them, find the support that they can go and get that help as well.
yeah, it's a great learning experience for you as the coach or the guide or whatever it is. Powerful. Kelly, I've really enjoyed this chat. We'll make sure we get your links in there. If there's anyone that's like wanting to reach out, what if you look at from a sport perspective, or just in general, you work with people, everyday people as well. What's sort of the key area that if they're thinking, well, why would I be drawn to go to Kelly? What's the key area that you will help them with that's going to help them to, improve their life?
Yeah, I would say personal development and human optimization, whether that's sport specific or mentally, emotionally, just teaching you the tools how to, be a better leader, to be a better significant other, to be a better person. So I start with you as a person. And then if you have goals along the way, I can guide you towards them. But ultimately, it's doing the inner work first. So when people are ready to heal their trauma and to sit with their baggage and acknowledge that, maybe they haven't been telling their whole truth because of, being afraid or, not knowing who to go to. But I would challenge everybody to find somebody you can trust and know that it's never too late.
Love it. So good. Thank you so much for coming on here and telling your story with such courage and conviction, and inspiring all of us to find ways to improve and to find more of our voice and our truth. Thank you, Kehly.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian.
You're welcome. Wow, what a courageous woman Kehly is, and I thank her for sharing all that she's learned along the journey, the ability to overcome adversity, to have that courage, and the lessons to add to your game plan. I love what she said about can't keep hitting the snooze button. At some point, you need to stand up and have the courage to say, I need to make the changes. I also loved how she's now paying that forward. So she's found a purpose to her life, even through some of the most horrific and challenging circumstances that life can throw at you. If you are ready to find more purpose in your life, then I'll make sure I drop in the link to join the purpose training so you can start finding more of that purpose that you can bring to every area of your life and start paying forward everything that you've learned and share that with the world. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.